Elena Rossi stood in her wedding dress, staring at the stranger zipping her into what should have been the happiest moment of her life. But the hands were wrong, cold, efficient, unfamiliar. When she turned, she didn't find a bridesmaid's smile. She found Victor Caldero's ice-gray eyes and the kind of silence that swallows screams. "Your groom isn't coming," he said, voice smooth as a blade. "But I am." In 30 seconds, Elena's dream died. In 60, she was gone, taken from her own wedding while 200 guests pretended not to see. Want to know what happens when your fairy tale becomes your nightmare? Stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far Elena's story travels. The bridal suite at the Grand Meridian Hotel smelled like gardenias and lies. Elena Rossi stood before the full-length mirror, her reflection a stranger in ivory silk and delicate lace. The dress hugged her curves perfectly, too perfectly perhaps for a woman who'd spent the last 3 months surviving on coffee and wedding anxiety. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant updo, small white flowers tucked among the curls like promises she was about to make, promises to a man she barely knew anymore. The thought slithered through her mind before she could stop it. Elena pressed her palms against the cool glass of the mirror, forcing herself to breathe. This was normal. Every bride had doubts. Every woman wondered if she was making the right choice when standing on the edge of forever. "You're being ridiculous," she whispered to her reflection. "Marco loves you." The woman in the mirror didn't look convinced. Behind her, the suite door opened. Elena turned, expecting to see her maid of honor, her cousin Sophia, who'd disappeared 20 minutes ago to check on the flowers. Instead, a woman she'd never seen before stepped inside. Tall, severe, dressed in black despite the celebration happening 3 floors below. "Oh, I'm sorry," Elena said, confusion creasing her brow. "I think you have the wrong room. This is the bridal suite." The woman didn't respond. She simply closed the door with a quiet click that sounded unnaturally loud in the suddenly too small space. "Excuse me?" Elena's voice sharpened. "Can I help you with something?" "Turn around." The woman's accent was Eastern European, her tone utterly flat, not a request, a command. Elena's heart began to hammer against her ribs. "I don't know who you think you are, but you need to leave. Right now. My wedding starts in 20 minutes, and your dress is unzipped. Turn around." Elena glanced over her shoulder at the mirror. The woman was right. The long line of tiny pearl buttons down her spine gaped open, the zipper beneath them only halfway closed. Sophia had been in the middle of fastening them when she'd rushed out to handle some crisis with the centerpieces. Every instinct Elena possessed screamed at her to refuse, to call security, to run. But she was alone in a locked room with a stranger, wearing a dress she couldn't remove by herself, and the woman's hands were already moving toward her. "Please hurry," Elena managed, her voice tight. "My cousin will be back any moment." "No," the woman said, her fingers cold and efficient as they worked the zipper upward. "She won't." The words hit Elena like ice water. "What did you say?" "Your cousin received a text from your mother. There's been an accident. She left through the service entrance 4 minutes ago." Elena spun around, nearly stumbling in her heels. "What? What accident? Is my mother okay?" "There was no accident." The woman's expression remained completely neutral, as if they were discussing the weather. "The text was sent from a burner phone. Your cousin is currently in a taxi heading to St. Michael's Hospital, where she will find your mother perfectly healthy and very confused." The room tilted. Elena grabbed the back of a nearby chair to steady herself. "I don't understand. Why would someone—" "Because you needed to be alone." A new voice, male this time, cultured and cold as winter steel. "And you are remarkably difficult to isolate, Miss Rossi. You surround yourself with people like a woman who knows she's in danger." Elena's head snapped toward the bedroom door of the suite. A man stood in the doorway, not the same entrance the woman had used, but the private door that connected to the master bedroom. He must have been there the entire time, waiting in the shadows while Elena had stared at her reflection and wondered if she was making a mistake. She knew immediately who he was, though they'd never met. You didn't grow up in the old neighborhood without learning to recognize wolves in expensive suits. Victor Caldero was shorter than she'd imagined from the whispered stories, maybe 5'9", but he carried himself like a man who'd never been looked down upon. His dark hair was swept back from a face that might have been handsome if it weren't so utterly devoid of warmth. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Elena's entire wedding, and his eyes, gray like storm clouds, like steel, like the barrel of a gun, fixed on her with the kind of attention that made her feel simultaneously visible and transparent. "I don't know you," Elena said, proud that her voice didn't shake. "You need to leave." "You do know me." Victor stepped fully into the room, and the woman in black moved to stand by the door, blocking the exit. "Perhaps not personally, but you know what I am, who I am. I can see it in your eyes. You're afraid, but not surprised." Elena's mind raced. She'd heard stories about Victor Caldero since she was a child. He was a ghost story mothers used to frighten daughters into coming home before dark. He was the reason certain streets stayed quiet after midnight, the reason certain debts never went unpaid, the reason certain men simply disappeared when they crossed lines that should never be crossed. He was the king of a kingdom built on blood and fear, and he was standing in her bridal suite 20 minutes before her wedding. "I don't want any trouble," Elena said carefully. "Whatever this is about, I'm sure there's been some mistake. I'm just a waitress. I don't have anything you could possibly want." "A waitress?" Victor's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Yes, at Gianni's on Lombard Street. You work the dinner shift, Tuesday through Saturday. You make decent tips because you remember the regular customers' names and their usual orders. You live alone in a studio apartment in the Sunset District, 3rd floor facing the street, terrible water pressure. You take the 28 bus to work because you sold your car 6 months ago to help pay for this wedding." Each detail landed like a physical blow. Elena's breath came shorter, faster. "How do you—" "You applied for 3 credit cards to cover the deposit on this venue. 2 were declined. The 3rd has an interest rate that borders on predatory, but you signed anyway because Marco convinced you that you deserved a fairy tale wedding." Victor moved closer, his footsteps silent on the plush carpet. "He was very persuasive, wasn't he? Very charming. Told you that you'd been invisible for too long, that you deserved to be seen, to be celebrated. Made you feel like a princess when you'd spent your whole life feeling like a servant." Tears burned Elena's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "You have no right to talk about him. You don't know anything about us." "I know everything about you, Elena." Victor was close now, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and cold. "I know your father abandoned your family when you were 7. I know your mother cleaned houses for 20 years to keep you and your brother fed. I know you put yourself through community college while working full-time, and that you still send money home even though your mother tells you not to. I know you are kind and loyal and far too trusting for a world as cruel as this one." "Stop." Elena's voice cracked. "Just stop. What do you want from me?" Victor reached into his jacket pocket. Elena flinched, her body bracing for violence, but he only withdrew an envelope, cream-colored, expensive paper, unsealed. "I want you to read this," he said, holding it out to her, "and then I want you to understand why your groom will not be walking down that aisle today." Elena stared at the envelope like it was a snake. "I don't want to read anything. I want you to leave so I can get married." "Marco Santini is not in the building." Victor's voice was patient, almost gentle, which somehow made everything worse. "He left through the loading dock 30 minutes ago. By now, he's halfway to the airport with a one-way ticket to Barcelona and a new passport under a name you wouldn't recognize." The world stopped. "You're lying," Elena whispered, but the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. "I'm many things, Miss Rosie, but I am not a liar. Not about this." Victor placed the envelope on the dresser beside her. "Your fiancé has been stealing from me for the past 8 months. Small amounts at first, skimming from shipments, inflating invoices, pocketing the difference. He thought he was clever. He thought he could hide in the chaos of my organization and take what he pleased without consequence." Elena's legs felt like water. She sank into the chair she'd been gripping, the elaborate wedding dress pooling around her like a deflated dream. "No, Marco works in marketing. He sells software. He wouldn't. He works for me." Victor's tone remained maddeningly calm. "He has for 3 years. He processes shipments, manages inventory, coordinates with suppliers. The software company is a shell, a convenient fiction for people like you who prefer their fairy tales uncomplicated." "I don't believe you." "You don't want to believe me. There's a difference." Victor gestured toward the envelope. "Read it, Elena, or don't. Either way, the outcome remains the same." With trembling hands, Elena opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, grainy, clearly taken from surveillance cameras, but unmistakable. Marco entering buildings she'd never seen. Marco shaking hands with men who looked like they ate fear for breakfast. Marco counting money, stacks and stacks of it, in what looked like a warehouse. And then, the final photograph. Marco at an airport check-in counter, taken less than an hour ago according to the timestamp. He wore jeans and a baseball cap, carrying a single duffel bag. He looked relaxed. He looked free. He looked like a man who'd just escaped something. "No." Elena's voice broke. "No, this can't be real. Marco loves me. He asked me to marry him. He planned this whole day. He wouldn't just—" "He planned this day very carefully," Victor interrupted, "as his exit strategy. You were his cover, Elena, his proof of normalcy. A sweet, innocent waitress with no connections to my world, no knowledge of what he really did. Who would suspect a man planning an elaborate wedding of embezzling from a crime lord? Who would look at a woman like you and see anything but exactly what you are? Honest, hardworking, decent?" The words were not